Just call the meeting to order, everybody. Welcome tonight. I'm going to start out with our land acknowledgement. So the City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their culture, heritage, and relationships to the land. And we'll just have a moment of reflection and or prayer. Okay, thank you. Before we start, I want to welcome everybody for coming tonight. It's our first meeting in May. I'd like to remind everyone that those who wish to act disrespectfully or disruptive through their words or actions may be expelled from the meeting. So no applause, no speaking out, no acts of disruptive or disrespectful or intimidating behavior. Should disruptions occur, a recess will be called while security asks those demonstrating a disrespect to leave. Thank you. So now we'll move to the adoption of the previous council minutes of April the 22nd. Is there any objections to adopting the minutes? So hearing no objections, council adopts the minutes of the April 22nd, 2024 regular city council meeting as presented. Now the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Councillor Hirsch, do you have an addition?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. I would like to add the item of, is it the 800 block of 2nd Street Southeast letter of interest.
Okay, thank you. Any other additions to the agenda?
I'll second that.
Oh, I'm sorry,
addition.
thank you. Okay, yep, thank you. So we'll vote. So that's unanimous. Thank you, Mayor Clark. So if there's no other additions to the agenda, we'll adopt the agenda otherwise as presented. Are there any council announcements? Again, any council announcements? So I just have one. I just want to take the time today to highlight a very important week this week, which is Mental Health Week. The Canadian Mental Health Association, lost my spot here, is highlighting compassion as this year's focus of Mental Health Week. And if our world needs anything more of now, it's compassion for ourselves and each other. Thank you. Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. So I ask if anyone would like to pull any items from the consent agenda for discussion. Is there anybody that would like to pull any items? So do I have someone to move the consent agenda, please? Councillor Hyder.
I move that council adopt the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Second by Councillor Sharps. Thank you. We'll vote. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to public hearings. So our first public hearing. So at the time of the public hearing is 6:35. And we'll do an introduction by administration. This is, where is it here? This is bylaw 4799 to amend the tax incentive bylaw. The sponsor is our city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is some amendments to the tax incentive bylaw. And just to give a brief overview, I'll turn it over to City Solicitor Bullock. Thank you.
Good evening, through the chair. I'll just inform council of what the amendments are to the bylaw. The tax incentive bylaw was passed pursuant to Section 364.2 of the MGA. The bylaw currently contains a few references to a different section of the Act because we incorporated a definition from that section in the bylaw. However, we felt that the reference to this other section, 364.1, could lead to some confusion in terms of which section the city was relying on. And so we're just seeking to make that clarification. The other aspect of the amendments are that we've added a section that allows the city manager to establish guidelines, rules, and procedures regarding the application process for and the administration of tax incentives under the bylaw. That amendment is necessary because the old incentive policy contains procedures regarding the tax incentive process, but those procedures were removed from the policy that was adopted by council on April 8th, 2024. So that's a high-level view of the amendments.
Thank you. Is there a presentation then, or are we just going to go into the?
Good evening. I don't have a presentation. I'm here to answer any questions you may have on the program.
Thank you. I don't see any speakers, so I guess we'll move to the public hearing. So I ask if there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak and to invite them to the podium. Ask them to provide and spell their name for the record and to indicate whether they are speaking in favor or against the bylaw. I'll just read it again. I ask if there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak and I'd invite them to the podium. Ask them to provide and spell their name for the record and indicate whether they're willing to speak in favor or against the bylaw. And a third time, I ask that anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak, I invite them to the podium, ask them to provide spell their name for the record and to indicate whether they speak in favor or against the bylaw. So hearing nobody, I'll close the public hearing at 6:38.
Through the chair, I move that council give second reading to bylaw 4799.
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll vote. Looks like we're going to have to vote again. And that's unanimous.
Through the chair, I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4799, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the tax incentive bylaw.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And we'll vote. And that's unanimous. So we will move on then to unfinished business, 10.1, which is bylaw 4735 to amend the unsightly properties bylaw. The sponsor is Development and Infrastructure, and the first reading was on April the 22nd, 2024.
So I move that subsection 1W of bylaw number 4735 be amended to read as follows. The following offense provisions is added to section 13.01. 13.01, a person who fails to comply with section A, 3 subsection 4, B, section 4 subsection 1, C, section 4 subsection 2, D, section 4 subsection 3, or section E, section 13.2 is guilty of an offense. So I move that council, that's our second reading, first reading. So can I just speak to this real quick, Andy? Or Councilor McGowan?
Yeah, so
Okay.
this should be our second reading.
It is.
correct? Yeah.
So it is our second reading, but there's an amendment, and I just want to point out what that was. The change to this bylaw was the words, under section who fails to comply with, and we missed section 3, subsection 4. So now that's been included. So just so everybody's clear on what that was. So the first one was missing. A, section 3, subsection 4 was missing from the original bylaw.
I'll second that. Counselor Sharps.
Thank you. I see we have Mayor Clark as the first speaker. Okay, so I guess we'll vote. And that's unanimous.
I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4735, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the unsightly property bylaw.
Okay, just a matter of order here. Apparently, we needed an amending motion before we went to second reading. So we did that, so now this is second reading.
Okay, so I move that council gives second reading to bylaw 4735 as amended.
Thank you.
My apologies.
I'll second that.
Mayor Clark, you wish to speak?
I wish to speak to the bylaw, but I have a few questions, if that's okay.
Yes, go
All
ahead.
right. So in terms of the definition, so 5.01, the term dilapidated vehicle is added as a defined term. And it's mostly the same as it was in the previous bylaw, except that it includes a vehicle that is incapable of being safely operated. And then it goes on to say later on in the policy that you're not allowed to have that type of car on your property. I'm just wondering why that was added, because presumably that could be, you know, a car that's waiting to be serviced or something like that. So I'm just wondering what problem we were trying to solve by adding that in.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock or City Manager?
Well, the concept of wrecked or dismantled vehicles has been in the bylaw since the very beginning, but we just thought that this definition was a little clearer. It actually aligns with the definition of dilapidated vehicle in the land use bylaw. And so we were just trying our best to add some clarity to it. As far as how it would be enforced, I think it's one factor among many that would be considered when a property is being looked at as to whether it's unsightly or not. It's not the only thing. And I think our officers would use proper discretion in the way they investigate those matters.
Thank you. Then I also have a question about the inclusion of occupier in addition to owner. And this is throughout the policy, or sorry, the bylaw. If an individual is living in a rental suite, like say a rental house or basement suite, they are technically an occupier, and so they can be charged with an offense under this bylaw, but they are likely not the person who is responsible for the maintenance of the structure. So I'm just wondering if we could have some clarity on who is, when an occupier would be liable for a landlord's obligation to keep things in a good state of repair, and why we would do that.
Through the chair, I just think it depends on the circumstances, Mayor Clark. I think that would, through the investigative process, the officers would determine who was responsible, and it's possible that an owner and an occupier could be issued an order to do the required work. Either one could be charged as well. It just kind of depends on the circumstances, though, as to which one would be the focus of attention. It's hard to speak to hypotheticals, I guess.
I think my confusion is in occupier, so it's 8.01B, a person who has the responsibility for and control over the condition of the land or structure on the land, the activities, blah, blah, blah. That makes sense to me. It's A that I struggle with, a person who is in lawful physical possession of the land or structure, which would be potentially just a tenant who does not have responsibility and control over the condition of the land or in structure. So it's 8.01A that I'm struggling with.
Are you referring to the amending bylaw?
Sorry, I'm referring to the red line on page 77.
I might refer this question to Matt Clausen, who worked on this project. He's online on Teams. I'm wondering if he could chime in on this matter.
Mr. Clausen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, through the chair. The definition of occupier is based largely on the definition, the same definition in the Occupiers Liability Act, and it is also very similar to the definition that we have in our wildlife bylaw. There could be situations where there is an occupier who's got physical possession of the land or the structure, but they haven't moved into it yet, or where it's not necessarily it's not necessarily the owner who would be responsible. Again, it would be case dependent and on the circumstances.
But then shouldn't it be and instead of or in 8.01? So to clarify that it's an occupier if they also have responsibility and control over the condition of the land or structure?
That's certainly a revision we could consider. I mean, generally, I think somebody who's in, physical possession of land or structure has, they exert some kind of control over it and would likely have some responsibility for it by virtue of being in possession of it. So, we just for consistency with the with provincial legislation and our own bylaws, we did put or in there, but if council would like us to consider or would like to change it to and, pardon me, council's free to make that direction.
Thank you. Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. Through the chair, I see that we have Inspector Secondiak here as well as the bylaw supervisor. Maybe if I could ask them a few questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So as we know, it was development and infrastructure that brought forward this bylaw request to get some meat behind the bones of this for the dilapidated properties and just to get our neighborhoods cleaned up a little bit. Can you tell me, either one of you, the difference between the last bylaw and this one? I mean, we can redline it, but the community watching on TV doesn't necessarily know what that is, nor the people in the audience. I'm hoping when I brought this forward was that we could get some meat behind the action, right? So it wasn't just everybody getting a $200 ticket and nothing ever happening and all the neighbors pissed off consistently. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Through the chair, I think the biggest enhancement would be the maintenance standards for property. So if you look at that, officers could deal with issues before the property becomes unsightly or dilapidated. It's just more tools in the toolbox for them to work with and work with the community and get their properties up to par.
So the intention is to work with the community, but are you saying the primary difference is we don't have to wait for a violation to happen? We can start while the violation is starting to happen before it gets to an extreme?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. If you look at people can look at the walls, exterior doors, stuff like that. So it's smaller things that could be fixed before property is classified as unsightly. So it could be more proactive.
Excellent. So one last question, you might not have an answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways because I asked it at DNI. And that is, let's talk about an insurance, like a fire. It's my favorite topic. There's a fire. So I actually went out to a house, and I told you this already. Last year, there was a fire. A homeowner invited me out. And when I went into the back alley and peeked over the fence, there was a koi pond that had also erupted in the fire. So it was outside, and it's been probably 8 months now, and the koi are still in there dead. So that to me is a little bit of a health hazard. It's right on the coulee, so there's, snakes, there's all sorts. What can we do about that kind of a problem? I guess I'm looking for, yes, I'm hearing there's meat behind the bones. What I'm asking for is show me where that is, please.
So yeah, mainly the unsightly would be complaint basis, and we have the authority without being invited to search the outside of the property. Can't go in the rear property or inside the dwelling itself.
Okay.
So, you know, there's other agencies that can, you have police or fire and emergency services that could help with that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we are addressing this. I mean, I went to that home and I personally would not want to live right beside them. And I don't think it's necessarily the homeowner. I'm not really sure who takes responsibility when there's an insurance claim, and maybe that's something we all need to better understand, or maybe as a municipality, we can put some pressure on insurance. I don't know, but I know that I wouldn't want to live there, so we should, you know, look at that when we're doing that. If we don't want to live there, maybe it's something we need to look at better. Okay, thank you.
City Manager?
Thank you. Through the chair, this is a further comment on Councillor Sharp's comments, and I do believe I raised it before, and I may put it over to Managing Director Bohan, but I think a lot of the problems we were seeing with the derelict property is there's different departments of the city that respond to these issues, and in my mind, and Managing Director Bohan and I have had this discussion, but I'd kind of like council to hear it and the public. Who is the lead department on these issues? Because often if there's a derelict property, we hear it's bylaw, it's safety codes, it's fire. Well, how are we connecting the dots to make sure that we're out there addressing these problems? So I'll throw it over to you, Managing Director Bohan. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. And early on, when we started taking a look at this, we met with the Chief of Police, and we had a lengthy discussion. He's most recently arrived in Medicine Hat from the City of Edmonton. The City of Edmonton has gone through a process of identifying a multi-agency approach to tackling unsightly properties. This is a common issue throughout North America, is unsightly properties and how you contend with property rights of owners and whatnot. We've met very frequently with members of the bylaw team and MHPS. So we are formulating, I would not say we are completely there yet, but we're formulating a multi-agency approach on how to tackle this. We currently meet on a quarterly basis to review. I can tell you that we've made significant progress since the end of December on a number of properties. So that's our plan, is to introduce this multidisciplinary approach, and we're going to need to pull together a little more I guess, governance in terms of how we're going to approach that.
City Manager, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. And just for the public that's here, and I know council understands this, but one of our challenges that we have is that bylaw falls under the MHPS, the Medicine Hat Police Service, which is enforcement. It's an arm of enforcement. We understand that. But I still think when you're fleshing out these processes, which I appreciate, we have to make sure that that's a special purpose board that isn't a department that reports up as normal. So I still do think there needs to be a lead head agency that's responsible. So if a member of the public calls and says, we need to address this derelict property in my neighborhood, that they have a one-window contact and they're not being said, it's safety, it's planning, it's bylaw. I really think you have to make sure that that's a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch, you haven't spoken on this yet.
Thank you. Just in reference to Mayor Clark's comments about occupier versus, I guess, the owner, I immediately go into the fact that we just talked about dilapidated vehicles. So imagine a renter, an occupier, that has a broken down vehicle on the property. Obviously, we would look to exercise this bylaw to enforce that sort of thing. That's kind of what popped in my mind. So I'm quite comfortable in terms of the language as it's stated, but I guess my question is actually 12.1. The city manager may establish the minimum requirements for the purposes of subsections. So I guess I'm just wondering why did we need to include that? minimum security requirements. And then what would this look like? And referencing the city manager, is it, going back to what you just mentioned, city manager, is it bylaws department? Who's the point on this? And I'm just wondering how we arrived on that point, that's all.
City manager?
Thank you, and I'll put it over to Matt Clausen. Do you want, or you? Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Actually, I think the police might be the best to respond to this. In our consultations with the police service, I believe that was a recommendation that they made to us. I think maybe they could probably speak to that.
It's 12.1 Inspector Secondiak that I was just looking at. Sorry, page 83 of the packet, but page 8 of the bylaw.
Through the chair, you'll have to forgive me. I would have to refresh my memory on the discussions around that. I just can't think of it off the top of my head, so
No, that's fine.
apologize.
Any further on that? Councilor Hirsch?
Well, I'm just trying to think in my mind what minimum requirements as opposed to what's listed already, but
Through the chair, maybe.
unfortunately, it might impact how I look at things, actually.
I could maybe try that. There are minimum standards that I'm aware of. Fire Services applies standards that are published by the International Association of Arson Investigators. And that we also consulted with them on this. So there is an industry standard that could be applied.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, appreciate that. Thank you. So thanks for clarification, because that's what so if it's a fire hazard or some sort of hazard, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Clark, do you have some new information that you want to surface?
I just wanted to finish my questions, if that's okay. I had the same question as Councillor Hirsch, so I will start with that one. If there are already requirements somewhere, I'm still not seeing how that would require us to give discretion to the city manager to establish the minimum requirements for the purposes of the relevant sections. Because that's, like, we're passing a bylaw outlining those requirements. Presumably, if there are other requirements in other bylaws or codes, those would already have their own enforcement mechanisms, and we should just add them in, I think, if that is what we intend to do.
Through the chair, I think the idea was just to bring attention to this matter, and the standard would be posted on the city's website. In this bylaw, municipalities have jurisdiction to pass bylaws like this. So in addition to what other other bodies have powers that are similar, I don't see any harm in including this in a bylaw, just to, I guess, to let people know that that's the standard that's expected. It's just more for notice.
But isn't the section saying that they can establish minimum requirements rather than just post the minimum requirements?
The establishment would just be adopting the existing standard. So that the idea wouldn't be to create new standards, it would be to adopt the standard that I referred to earlier.
I don't read it that way. I'm a little bit confused about the use of the word establish if it's just publishing.
Well, those standards could change, I guess, Mayor Clark. The one that I referred to, in future, there could be a new standard that's more applicable than the one that I just described that could be adopted. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I'm still not clear on that one, but I have a couple of other questions. Maybe this is sort of in the same vein. on page 81 of the red line version, section 4.5. It says that if a structure has been declared unfit for human habitation or use by any health or building authority, I assume we're, in some cases, the building authority, and then we're creating an offense if they don't do it within a certain period of time, why are we adding another layer if there's already an enforcement mechanism by a health or business authority? What is the added value, or what is the problem we're trying to solve by also creating an offense if they don't do that?
Well, again, I think this section's not unusual, Mayor Clark. Other municipalities have sections like this in the research that we did. I mean, Mr. Clausen can perhaps speak to that, but I don't see any harm in including a section like that that just basically says that if, you need to comply with any requirements of a health authority. Failing to do that could result in a bylaw charge. We have the authority to create a bylaw that contains a clause like that, I would say. I wonder if Matt has any extra comments on that.
Yes, thank you through the chair. As City Solicitor Bullock said, it's really meant to be a helpful provision. It adds another enforcement option to the city. Mayor Clark, you're right. The wording is broad enough for health or building authority that it could include the city as a building authority in some circumstances. And by creating an offense for in this bylaw for failing to deal with the structure in accordance with the city's instruction, it's a more efficient kind of vertically integrated enforcement. We can issue a violation ticket under this bylaw rather than perhaps going through a stop order process under the MGA or have it to go through the Crown because a violation ticket can't be issued for an offense under the Municipal Government Act. And so it's another enforcement mechanism that's a little more efficient perhaps than some of the other mechanisms available, and it's not unique to Medicine Hat.
Thank you. And then in 5B, if no time is specified by the health or building authority within 12 months following the date of the declaration, I'm just wondering, for example, if someone's house burnt down or they had significant fire damage to their home, you would have to go to insurance, through insurance. Is 12 months a reasonable period of time when considering the insurance process and all of those things to have the work completed? I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that.
Through the chair, I can speak on this one. So it gives 12 months, but for a house fire or something like that, we'd work with the owner as long as they're showing there's some progress or keep us afloat of what's going on. There is the discretion of the officers.
Thank you. And then with respect to 13.1 and 13.2 on page 83, 13.2 says a person shall not obstruct, oh, no, that's the wrong one, I apologize. It's the section that says so it's 13.1, each day or part of a day, then an offense under this bylaw constitutes a separate offense. So when you go through what the sections that are there, it is an offense to let your property become in disrepair, but we also have the opportunity to issue a direction or an order. I'm just wondering if someone has let their property go into a state of disrepair, we haven't issued an order. Every day that their property is in disrepair, we can charge them with a new offense rather than issuing the order and then just ensuring compliance with the order or issuing the directive and complying with the directive. I'm just not sure why each of the requirements, if the intention is to issue a directive or an order, why each of the things that could get a directive or order issued would be a separate offense each day that it continues. Does that make sense?
Through the chair, so we always start with directive or orders. So if they don't comply with the directive of order, then we'd go to tickets. So then officer could potentially give a ticket every day they're not in compliance.
Okay, well, this says that it is an offense, not just to not comply with the order or not comply with the directive. It's an offense to, for example, have a dilapidated vehicle on your property each day you have it on your property, even before a directive or order is issued.
Through the chair, yes, we could, but we usually work with them. So it's how much time do you need to remove the vehicle? And then if they don't, it's the thing that we could say every day it's on here could constitute a fine. So it's a tool you have that we wouldn't want to take away, because there's some that might need to go right to that enforcement tool before you give a directive.
Okay. That is all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager.
Thank you. Through the chair, I do appreciate the questions. However, I'm just thinking that broadly, there's a lot in there that is administrative and process-driven. So I just wasn't sure how long we were going to go line by line through it. And I'm a little concerned for time-wise, and also that council has had this red line version for a long time. And in the sake of time, we could have actually sent these questions back so administration could have been prepared for this evening.
Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, I just had actually a couple of comments that, and I'll be brief with them, that arose from Mayor Clark's questions. And I just wanted to make sure, and I think maybe Mr. Clausen is probably in the best position to answer these questions, but if city manager wants to direct them to somebody else. I just want to make sure that I understand that bit about the city manager setting the standards and the subsections it applies to. So I'm not sure if he's still here, if the speaker list has covered him up, or you want him to answer.
City Manager, go ahead.
Through the chair, and before I throw it over to Matt to address some of the concerns, it may be more appropriate, and since you're the legal expert, Matt, I'll let you determine this. The city manager may adopt. Would that be a more palatable phrase?
Mr. Clausen?
Certainly no concerns from my perspective.
So I can say that I was actually happy with the word establish, although I think adopt could be an equally good word. I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Clausen, that I understood that was when, I'm just scrolling back, that if a structure is intended for human habitation, the reference is that the city manager can set the thickness of a material covering, I guess, an opening that's sufficient to prevent unauthorized entry. That's what the city manager is able to do under that section?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Robbins. The intent is, unauthorized entry.
Yeah, and same thing with secured in a manner to make sure there's not an unauthorized entry.
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you. And the reason that I ask that is that, and I've said this many times before, is when you have a bylaw that is about behavior and not about other things. This is behavior-based. You have to really think about what's in there, and I do appreciate that this language leaves it to the city manager to determine what those standards should be on those two kind of narrow issues. You know, how thick should the plywood be so no one can break in? How can it be secured so no one can break in? Someone's got to make those decisions, and posting them on the website makes sense to me. If we tried to finagle these words to meet every single house or residence in Medicine Hat, I think we would struggle with that. So I just want to say I appreciate the wording. I think it makes sense to me. And the other comment I think that came out of Mayor Clark's discussion was occupier or owner of the residence. And I certainly think we're all aware of this. Sometimes you have someone that owns property and their tenants are the ones that do the destruction of the property, not the owner of the property. And there has to be some room for bylaw to deal with either of them. That the property may not have become in that state because of the choices of the owner. It may purely be the choices of the renter, so, or the occupier, whoever that may be. So I actually thought the "or" was a good choice of language. Those are all my questions and comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Clark?
Yeah, so just to clarify, my read of the section with respect to the city manager's authority is that it includes parts of 3.2E, which maybe I'm missing which parts of that. So 3.2E, that has to do with general maintenance. So I think it's 4 and 5, which is exterior doors and windows do not operate as they were intended. So is and then not properly constructed or maintained so as to completely exclude rain. So is the intention then that just like whatever our planning rules are, or our, like, that those would be the specific things, like what would that look like?
City manager?
Thank you. Through the chair, for the various questions that have come up, this section and any section that delegates anything to the city manager, there would be broad-based consultation. With example, for Councillor Robbins' question, I have no idea what the proper plywood covering is, but I do have people on my team who know that, so that I wouldn't randomly pick these out, and I wouldn't need to know every single specific. But I would go to the people who knew this, and then I would determine that. We'd have a consultation, and then we would put those in place. So when they say delegate to the city manager, I am not a planning authority. I'm not an engineer, but I do have people on my team that are. So there would be the broad-based consultation before anything was implemented or approved.
Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair, and again, Mr. Clausen, if you can help me out. So 3 subsection 2 subsection E subsection 6 subsection B has very similar wording about what the city manager can do to section 4 subsection 3 subsection B. It's the same two things I just talked about. They're just in two different sections. So it's two things the city manager does: sets the thickness if their standards need to be applied, secures. So am I right about this, that section 3 subsection 2 subsection E6B, you know what I'm talking about, and 4.3B are the same, they're just in two different sections for two different reasons, obviously, those two different sections. And same thing with the same beginning subsection C of both?
I could probably speak to that.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
there are
yes.
two different sections, two different meanings. 3 deals with unsightly property and what factors can be considered in determining whether a property is unsightly. 4 sets positive maintenance standards that property owners must follow.
So those sections are the same, and those are the same two,
They're similar.
I'm gonna say powers, but I don't mean it by powers, you know what I mean, city manager eventual, that the city manager can establish.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you. I just wanted to give some context to Mayor Clark as well. I can talk about this one house that we were talking about. Inspector Sakoniak might remember. It was probably, well, no, you don't remember. It was still on police commission. I was irate. Anyways, the gentleman got an order, and he's not in the house, obviously, and he went to cover the windows because they were smashed. So somebody had tried to break into the house, so he was frustrated as well. There was no ignorance on the homeowner's part, but he was just frustrated. He went in and he taped newspaper. So to the context, I think that's where that was going. And so it was funny because the neighbor called back again, and there was nothing in the bylaw that could actually do anything because it was covered. So it didn't meet the needs, but the wording and the verbiage was used against the city, and basically nobody could do anything. So it was really quite annoying. I think he was just frustrated, insurance wasn't paying out, and he eventually got over himself and he went and did the right thing. But at the time, he just covered it with newspaper. So just to give somebody some context as to, I think that's why that came in.
So seeing no other speakers, we'll vote. And that's unanimous. So we'll move on to, oh, we need third reading, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I am so sorry. I move the council gives third and final reading to bylaw 4735, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the unsightly property bylaw.
I'll second that.
Seeing no speakers, we'll vote. And that's unanimous. So now we'll move on to 10.2, which is revised respectful workplace policy 8047, which is to rescind the original respectful workplace policy 8023 and rescind workplace violence and prevention policy 8040. And the sponsor is our city manager. You want to start off? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. If everybody will remember, at our last council meeting, we had Director Koken here, and along with our legal team, to talk about the changes to the respectful workplace policy. There was a bit of discussion, and we have now brought that back with those changes incorporated. And I will turn it over to Director Koken to explain those. And we also have Leah Haney as well, who was a big part of the work that we did. So thank you both.
Great, thank you. So just a quick review. We've brought this back for you with the updated requests that happened at the last council meeting. So we've updated the investigative process to be more prescriptive as to who and how a complaint is filed. And it's been split up is if you see, here's what a complainant will do, here's what a respondent will do, so it's much more clear. And we've also changed who the investigator would be and the appeal process as well. So we're open to discussion and questions, and this has been work with City Solicitor Bullock and Solicitor Haney as well, so any questions that I am not able to answer, they are here as well.
City manager.
Thank you. Can you just explain how you changed the process so that it was in a table form and it was a lot easier to read under the new for the public? Thank you.
So you see that the table has been expanded significantly because we wanted to put as much as possible into the table. Now you should be able to look at the table, and if you know who the complainant is and who the respondent is, you should be able to follow the table to see who should be the lead investigator and who should be the decision-making body. I know it looks like a lot on the page all at once, but if you are testing it out by saying this is the complainant and this is the respondent, you should be able to follow it.
Thank you. Mayor Clark.
Thank you, and thank you for the changes to the table. There are a few sections throughout the policy that I'm not sure now agree with the table. So, for example, 2.04, the director, manager, supervisors, refer all complaints to the director of people services or the city solicitor. And then work with Director of People Services to develop a recommendation for disposition of the complaint. 2.05D, refer all complaints to the Director of People Services, and so on. I'm just wondering if that should actually be to the appropriate person in Table 1.
Through the chair. In the case of 2.05D, it is referring to workplace violence, so that wouldn't be a complaint. All incidents of workplace violence must be addressed. That's because this policy is being combined with the workplace violence policy is being combined with the respectful workplace policy. And my apologies, I didn't catch the other section.
I think 2.05D is both immediately report workplace violence and also refer all complaints to the Director of People Services. So I'm just specifically wondering about the all complaints part. And then 2.06B, I thought there was another one, but I can't find it at the moment. So I'm just wondering if there should be instead a reference to the table.
Yes, through the chair, that is an adjustment that we could make to make sure that the table takes precedence.
And maybe I'm just missing this, but in 2.07F, it specifically talks about the maintaining confidentiality of any report of workplace violence or harassment or complaint. I'm just wondering, is there another place where it says that that applies universally to anyone who has contact with the complaint? Or is it just the People Services Department?
Yes, through the chair, I think there's another section that references that in relation to workplace violence, but in terms of specifying that for the complaint, that's the only section where it talks about the complaint being confidential.
Do you think it should apply to everyone?
Yes, we could make the adjustment to have it apply to the lead investigator as well.
Through the chair, those are procedure amendments and therefore under the purview of the administrative committee.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Chair McGrogan. I just want to give a few accolades to the Carla and her team that I don't need to wordsmith much, but I'm very proud of what you brought back, and I appreciate all the hard work and time that goes into everything, so thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Hyder. And again, City Solicitor Bullock and City Solicitor Haney, along with Occupational Health and Safety, this really truly was a team effort.
Mayor
Yes.
Clark, you had something further?
Yes, last thing. I think I mentioned this last time as well. The procedures in the header, it starts at, I think, page 2. It starts saying it's procedures, but then in the content, procedure doesn't start till section 3, which is on page 100 of the package and 12 of the policy. Reason that's important is because council has control over the policy, administrative committee has control over the procedures. So just for clarity, I think to me, it's clear that procedures don't start till section 3, but the header seems to indicate it starts much earlier.
Yes, through the chair, we did look into this and did identify that other policies and with procedures attached are formatted the same way. And so for consistency, we wanted to keep that the same. But we did add to the role of council in the policy to ensure that when council has a role under the procedures, that can't be changed by admin committee without council's approval.
So to be clear, the procedures that are the jurisdiction of the administrative committee start at section 3?
Through the chair, they do start at the definitions, and that is consistent with other policies with procedures attached that we were able to identify.
Okay.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers.
Should I put a?
Do we have a motion on the table yet?
Yes, no, I'd love to do that for you. I move the council rescinds original respectful workplace policy 8023 and workplace violence and prevention policy 8040 and approves the new respectful workplace policy 8047 as presented.
I'll second that.
I guess now, is there any further speakers? I think we pretty much talked this one out, so and if there's not, we'll go to vote. Thank you. And that's unanimous. So now we have 10.3, which is information requests. The sponsor is city manager.
Through the chair, this request has come forward through Mayor Clark, and it's on the agenda. I believe it was postponed twice, if I remember, the last time for lack of information. So it is on the agenda at her request, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So my request was to have the information come forward. The information hasn't come forward. I have provided the background as requested. The most up-to-date version that I sent on Thursday before the agenda went out did not make it into the agenda. But the previous version I sent on Wednesday did. I think the backgrounder speaks for itself. I thought my written inquiry spoke for itself. I'm entitled to the information both as a counselor, and as a member of the public, as I outline, if there are items in the documents I'm requesting that are not permitted to be disclosed pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, those items can be redacted from the public version, and we can view them in a closed session. But my request was to have the information come to the meeting so that we could discuss the information. So it wasn't asking permission of council to receive information that I'm entitled to, which I feel like it has kind of turned into that. But so I'm not really sure what the intention of this discussion is.
Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. I think for me, the issue when this was first raised back in February when the email was received was that no member of this council can direct any city staff to do anything. It's the whole of council has to do that direction. So when that email came out, I responded, you referenced it in the index. I'd happily read my email to the public. Don't prepare an email I wouldn't put on the front page of paper if they wanted to report on it. But my question then and my question now is they're the same. I'm not really sure why the information is necessary for governance. I think it comes very close to the line of operations. But when this was first on the agenda, I made some notes, and then I read your material, Mayor Clark, when it was provided, and asked for more time to read it because of the short timeline we were given. I read all of your material from Thursday, so I feel like I have the full information and understanding of why. So these are my comments it didn't change my comments much, but I feel like I need to be very clear in what I want to say here. So first, I wanted to say some things about FOIP. That's not the creation of the City of Medicine Hat, contrary to some public opinion. It's provincial legislation. We're bound by it as a public body that gathers private information from Alberta citizens. So it's provincial law. We have to follow it, and there's limitations of what can be released. Council has no control over FOIP, but we do have obligations under FOIP to keep records of decision-making. We did receive an orientation to FOIP and records retention way back in 2021, but just looking at City Manager Mitchell, a FOIP update refresher would probably be very helpful for all members of council because we do hold public documents. I have worked for a public body for 22 years. FOIP was proclaimed back in 1995, so I know that my entirety of my career has been I make decisions, I document them, I follow records retention rules, and many times I've had to respond to a FOIP request, which is my whole point of this little speech, is that I know how long it takes to gather all of the emails, the data, the background. You need someone who's trained in FOIP requests, you need time to collect it, review it, and respond to the request, and all of that is a considerable amount of work for members of staff. When I first saw the request, I was given no context to it, but what it said to me is that that was going to require a lot of work to collect the information and to do other things, to review all the severance contracts, to review all the other employment contracts, make sure any privacy concerns were addressed under FOIP. And I felt that in order to provide this information to Mayor Clark, that use of time and taxpayer dollars should be considered by council, which is why I wanted to discuss it, as I said in my email, again referenced in your index, that I wanted to discuss it as a group so I could understand. And I felt that there was probably a budget amendment that was going to be required to be able to have enough capacity to answer every item in the request. So for me, it was about a budget necessity. I'm also aware that an external audit is completed. You've referenced that in your materials, and we received the results of it, and that any anomalies identified, improved processes. And so in my original email, I suggested I wanted to hear from the chair of the audit committee about the checks and balances that existed, because then that would tell me a lot about whether the taxpayer dollars should be spent diving into these things. I know the audit committee sits regularly. We have access to their agenda package, and the last one was, I think, April 3rd. I just saw a new, I think they're meeting again in June. It'll be another package then. The other thing I know is that my career has involved relying on experts outside of my own knowledge. So it might be a medical expert, it might be a forensic accountant, it might be accounting experts, forensic evidence. I don't have the hubris to sit here and say that my judgment would exceed a forensic accountant or a CPA just because I'm elected to sit here. So I'm not sure what getting that information is going to get me without an expert accountant to go through all of these things with me. I also noted that the information sought to me was very targeted. So there's no explanation why this specific information is so targeted. And the reason I say that is that I work for a level of government that discloses income to everyone over a certain salary level, which is something that Councillor McGrogan was suggested, I think, back in December, and then we put it over so we could have the director of HR. So I would like to get an update about where that is in the process, because when we were discussing it, I did say that in my level of government, they call it the sunshine list, but it's not that sunshiny, but over a certain level of income, and also if there's a severance package it's reported, and what's the other thing that's reported? Oh, all expense claims of everybody. So if you wanted to, people who are bored and need something to do, you could feel free to Google the last expense claim I made. You can find it there. The information's a bit behind. I think it's up to 2021, again, because of the amount of work it takes to input all of that information. So that was my question, is why is it so targeted? Why isn't it all the directors? Why isn't it all the managers? Why isn't it everyone with a P card? Why not all city expense claims? And how deep in the weeds are we expected to go? There were some things in the request, if I go through it individually, that I struggle with. Why we are reviewing things before our time in council and the amount of work it would take to do that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This city manager has been here since 2023, so asking her to provide some information about 2023 might make some sense to me, but not going back that far. I don't know how she could be accountable for what happened in 2023 to 2021 or 2020 when we receive reports, and these have all been through audit committee before. I do work in government. I technically work out of head office, which is in Edmonton. I choose to live in Medicine Hat. I don't get paid living expenses for living in Medicine Hat, but I know how difficult it is to hire people, qualified people. So I'm not really sure, other than to give some direction to the city manager about knowing more about that, to see what the issue is the issue that we're hiring people who don't want to move to Medicine Hat because no qualified people will move to Medicine Hat, or like what is the HR issue behind that? I'd be interested to know what administration's ideas are to fix that problem. I'm not sure just knowing this information. I want to know, like, what's the solution if it is indeed a problem. The severance agreement I mentioned, I think that's a lot of work for the city solicitor. I would expect if we're going down that road, a budget amendment is required because each of those severance agreements would have some sort of disclaimer, privacy issue. I've never signed a severance agreement or drafted one, so I'm just saying that as a regular person, not using my law degree. I'm just saying I'm sure there's things in there that are an issue, and the ones that in my department are already vetted for that, and so that vetting would have to happen. I will say number 3, an accounting of all funds reallocated. I think it would be helpful to know that, as city manager is our employee, and I'm not sure what was reallocated in 2023 because of the accounting that we get. So I would like to know that. The staff turnover statistics, again, why I'm going back to 2020, I don't know. And then the city manager's itemized expenses and P-cards expenses, as you stated in your materials, you sign them and you've never told us there's a problem with them. So I think city manager is our employee. That's maybe information that we could review in a committee. Perhaps audit committee could receive that information and review it. That would make sense to me. And each managing director's itemized expenses and P-card statements, again, it's so narrow. I don't know why it's not everyone with a P-card. It's not all management like it is with my level of government. And so I'm not sure why knowing what the managing director's 2023 itemized expenses are is going to make much of a difference in terms of what our job is, which is to govern and set the budget. So I struggle with that. A couple of the things in the request I understand and I agree with, and a lot of it I'm still struggling to analyze where we fit in that big picture. As I said, like, if there was a motion to have a briefing note prepared about the cost of all of this, the increased staffing, which would be required, I would think, in the clerk's office, the city solicitor's office, the finance department, how many people do we need to respond to these requests? If that was the case and the money came from council's contingency fund, unless city admin had another idea, I might consider that. But I don't know at the moment what the cost is of collecting and reviewing this information, so I can't really make a reasonable decision about spending taxpayer dollars for time that has already passed, and I don't think it helps me make decisions outside of 2023. And I do think this is going to be a significant amount of work, which is why I thought council should weigh in on it, because it will involve a budget increase, in my opinion. This is not work that could be absorbed by the finance group or the city solicitor's office or the city clerk's office without extra resources allocated. So that's my comment about the request. I don't have any questions about the materials or comments about the materials. Those were my considerations back when it first came up, and these are my considerations today.
Mayor Clark, you're next on the list.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions and comments. The reason that I included multiple years for certain things, such as the living expenses and the turnover rates, and severance agreements, was to determine if there was a pattern. So maybe this is how it's been for a long time, maybe this is a change, but that is why I requested multiple years. I would be happy just to have the period of time that we've been council. That's fine with me. I was not about holding the city manager accountable for things that happened when she wasn't here. It was just to establish maybe this is normal. Maybe it's not normal. We don't know, because without that context. But I would be happy to amend just to the period that we've been council. With respect to the severance agreements, they likely do contain confidentiality, but we can't contract out of the provincial legislation. And I did mention that in my document. In terms of being targeted with the itemized expenses, I am trying to flag a few things, for sure, and that's why I'm bringing it to council. I wanted it to come to council. But also with the city manager and managing directors, that is a defined group, it's the executive, and perhaps it will reveal we need to do a larger ask, but I hear you saying that it's gonna be a lot of work. That's why I tried to narrow it and target it. So it wouldn't be such an excessive amount of work. I feel like all of this information that I've requested should be readily available in terms of our accounting software to be able to print a report. I haven't heard any response about like what an additional cost would be or how long it would take. I feel somewhat frustrated that other people on this council make requests for information. And so in terms of me directing administration, I have a duty under the MGA to obtain this information. And so if that rule is going to apply to me, that I have to ask council's permission for information, I think that should apply universally to all requests for information.
So so I appreciate that, and I'm just gonna cut in for a minute. I did, if we're talking about, I put a notice of motion forward to seek council's approval in asking for the compensation list that I did. So there is some precedence where if we're asking, I guess, for a large amount of work to be done, I think it's clear in the bylaw that it should go through council. It should be the will of council, not one. So I don't know what other ones you're referring to, but I clearly remember bringing it as a notice of motion. And what I appreciated about the notice of motion, though we're still waiting for the information, is that what came out of the conversation of all of us, I think, was better than my original notice of motion. I really appreciated that. And that's where I see the value in it. So I know, I guess as chair, I spoke out of turn, but if you're speaking of that issue, I just wanted to be clear that I did put a notice of motion forward, which I thought was the appropriate way to do it. City Manager Mitchell, you're next.
Thank you, through the chair. And I'm going to answer some of Councillor Robbins' questions first. Councillor McGrogan's notice of motion, we're dealing with it. We've drafted a briefing note. It's going to come through, I believe, next week's admin committee, and we've done a jurisdictional scan, so that will be coming forward. With regards to the other things, I don't have an issue giving this information. I'm in my 20th year in this position. I know about public money. I know how to be responsible for it. I have no issue with my expenses. Where I do have a little bit of concern with this request is that council has one employee, which is the city manager. The managing directors report up to the city manager, not to council. So the fact that the request is including managing director's expenses, I do have concerns with that, because that would be like me going to one of my managing directors and starting to ask in their area, which I have the right as the head of operations, but in a governance body, that is not something that should be under the purview. We have stayed under policy and we have stayed in budget. There are not things to be flagged or looked at, but I do not have an issue getting this information to council. My concern is the protection of the people and the severance agreements, because they're private. And I do think if we do share this information, that it needs to be in a closed session to make sure those individuals' privacy are being protected. One thing I would appreciate is the opportunity to bring back a briefing note, as Councillor Robbins suggested, so that we can kind of explain the scope of how much work it would be and the time it would take. It is not as easy as pressing a button on a machine. We have to be respectful of everybody's privacy, and these severance agreements, these requests, will affect people in this organization, and we have to be mindful of that. Right now, we are being inundated with FOIP requests, with everything. So we have to be mindful of all these things that staff is doing. So we will bring back a robust briefing note and explain where we see the work being done and what the cost will be, because I think that is the only way council can make an effective decision.
Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I guess I take issue with the Mayor Clark is the only one who has to ask for information. I did a briefing note with a notice of motion requesting that staff look into 2 different types of grants programs that I thought might be valuable to the city of Medicine Hat. We all discussed them, and then staff was directed in a narrower way than I had intended, but that was fine. That was the decision of council. And that's why we discussed it before I just simply emailed someone and said, I need this information, or I want you to do this. My email says specifically in answer to what you've said here, Mayor Clark, I'd be interested in hearing about the reason for the request and from the audit committee chair about checks and balances in place in the audit committee's work, as well as an estimate of the number of staff hours it would take to complete the request. And I sent that email on February 24th. That is the information that I'm really interested in, how many staff hours that it might take. And then I'm very wary of the line between governance and operations. So, but I needed to start with step 1. This is a lot of information, how much it's going to take. So it's not like if Mayor Clark makes a request to the city manager or to any staff about a question that can be answered, like the type of request that I've made, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure I could find one in an email, is with information because a member of the public or citizen needs it. But it wouldn't be anything that would take longer than a 5-minute email response. I don't think there's anyone that I'm aware of on this council who has asked for this quantity of work to be done on one request. So it's not Mayor Clark can't have it. It's more like it's a lot of work to do it, and we're going to need to make a budget amendment to get it done. And does everyone else think that it's necessary for governance? Those are the questions that I'm asking here. And to me, the road in front of us is before us, not behind us. I don't want to keep looking behind. It doesn't serve us here. I want to keep looking forward.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. I just had a couple of statements, and I just wanted to acknowledge Mayor Clark on the request for information. I know I put 2 in, but I made motions in front of council, and I think I got both of them passed. But I will tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I put in a motion which all of you shot down, and that was for a request. Do you remember that? And that's just part of the will of council, but I put in a request to remove all closed meetings, and not one person around this table supported that. And you know what? Boo-hoo. You just move on. You make your motions. I listen to all of you. I don't necessarily agree with you. I would love to remove all closed meetings. I know, a lot of people around this table just cringe when I say that, but I would like nothing better to remove all closed meetings. And I think, then to your point, we probably wouldn't have these. So maybe next time second me and we can get this going. I would love that. But I agree with you that we need to do our job. I agree with a lot of what you've written. I also disagree with a lot. However, I think that ultimately, if our role is governance and we have to be responsible for the money, 100% I support you on that. But I'm hoping we can do that in budget time. And if I've got this wrong, I'm okay to be corrected. But I've always been taught, and it's when we first, I know the whispering up there is really distracting down here. I'm just going to ask you not to. It echoes, please. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I will just say to you that I remember when we went through some training, and initially I reached out to George Cuff a few times because I had additional questions, and I have questions, I'm going to get them answered. So, it was awesome. It was great. He educated me, made sure that I, stay on governance, because I think in our first 2 months, I slipped into operations, and it was you that actually smacked my hand, and I'm like, okay, I got it. And that's okay. That's what a team does, and you pull yourself back and you get going here. If you have concerns and we are over budget, 100% I will support you. I will 100% support anybody that wants to make sure our budgets are within line, that we're spending taxpayer dollar appropriately and to what we agree. I promise you I will support that. I get a little frustrated when I look at 2021, 22, and I know that you've conceded that maybe we don't need that. And you're right, you're just trying to see what past practice is. I can understand that. I think that there's enough people, maybe not the city manager, but every other managing director, city solicitor Bullock, managing director Pankos, there's some years around this table that can tell us if this was past practice or not. And I mean, I think we have a strong enough relationship with admin. We don't always agree with them. That's not our job to agree with them or each other, but it is to, respectfully get the information. So anything to do with budget, you will have my full support. Honesty, I want to get to the bottom of our taxpayer dollars. I want to know if we're spending wisely and if we could do better decisions. You will have my 100% support. I get, when I see the P cards and things like that, I think I'm out because you're the ones that signs them. And I trust that you wouldn't have sign something that wasn't appropriate. I do. I trust you to do exactly what you said you would do. And I continue to have that trust in you. So, and I'm not revoking that trust. We all have our roles, and I trust you that if you had a concern, you would have brought it to us. That's it.
Councillor Dubanowski.
Through the chair, I have some comments prepared. I rise today with a heavy heart, compelled to address the troubling narrative surrounding this request in our community. It is my submission that the language surrounding the concept of accountability and transparency today has the potential to insinuate nefarious action or expense by senior leadership. The recent requests made under the guise of transparency and accountability have instead started to sow seeds of discord and mistrust. It is my concern that this request is rooted on nothing less than baseless accusation and supposition. Political rhetoric holds no position in healthy discourse, especially when it comes to matters as crucial as accountability and transparency. Such actions not only sow seeds of discord, but also undermine the trust and the cohesion within our organization. Accountability and transparency are not mere buzzwords to be weaponized for personal or political gain. They are foundational principles upon which our governance is built, meant to ensure integrity, fairness, and the public's trust. The principles of accountability and transparency are being used to undermine and embarrass our senior management while also exploiting confidential information that should be safeguarded and audited internally rather than publicly exposed to foster trust and accountability within the organization rather than to undermine and embarrass. Let us not allow the pursuit of transparency to compromise the integrity of our local government. While the principles of transparency and accountability are essential pillars of good governance, they must not be manipulated to circumvent the checks and balances already put in place to safeguard sensitive information. We must recognize that confidentiality exists for valid reasons, to protect the interests of our organization, our staff, our constituents, to ensure the integrity of our decision-making processes, and to uphold the trust placed in us by the public. I'm deeply concerned that today's request actually finds itself in direct conflict with transparency and accountability, whose inherent values are meant to foster trust and integrity, but may being manipulated for personal gain or political agenda. The consequences of such actions not only tarnish the reputation of our organization, but also erode the trust for those we serve. Accountability and transparency are not tools for public spectacle. They are commitments to responsible governance. When used improperly, they do not jeopardize the effectiveness of our internal processes, but also compromise the security of restricted information. We must recognize that confidentiality is not a hindrance to transparency. Rather, it is a safeguard against abuse and exploitation. Our constituents entrust us with the confidence to handle it with the utmost care and diligence. During the past few weeks, I can't help but acknowledge the damage inflicted upon our organization and the fractures that have developed within this council table. As a consequence, our community has been on the receiving end of mixed rhetoric and divisive maneuvering. Instead of resorting to political tactics that cast unfounded aspersions, we must engage in constructive dialogue, grounded in fact and mutual respect. It is only through collaboration and a commitment to shared values that we can truly serve the best interests of this community. Confidence in our governance is not a commodity to be bartered away. It is at the bedrock upon which our community stands. The mirror that reflects our actions should not distort reality, but rather reveal the unvarnished truth. However, regrettably, it seems that this mirror has become clouded, casting doubt upon the integrity of this very institution, and at the same time eroding the trust of our valued constituents. Together, let us reaffirm our commitment to ensuring that we serve as instruments of trust and confidence in the governance of our community. As elected stewards of the public trust, let us reclaim the honest narrative of transparency and accountability. We must lead by example, demonstrating through our actions, not just our words, that we are committed to upholding the highest standards of integrity in local government. As we deliberate on the merits of the request before us today, I urge everyone to reflect on the consequences of their words and actions. Let us strive to elevate the discourse, uphold the dignity of our publicly appointed positions, and work together toward a common goal, which is a more prosperous and brighter future for the citizens of Medicine Hat. For it is only through sincere actions, rather than empty words, that we can truly serve the best interests of those who we are privileged to represent. So without a proper briefing note being brought forward with the appropriate safeguards, as discussed earlier, and costings in place, I cannot support the decision as worded today. Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
Thanks, Councillor Duwanowski. You covered up some of the points I wanted to make. I guess I look at, and I just wrote here, the suggestion to discuss is some of the information that's requested is absolutely very sensitive. I'm still trying to understand, quite frankly, the rationale, and I am a bit frustrated as chair of audit. It does lead me down with the request with a level of consternation that I'm trying to be respectful of here in this dialogue. But I do have some observations. The request was based was straightforward, and it was asked a few times already as indicated, but yet tonight we've now had an amended and another further amended request, and I'm just still in my mind trying to understand the rationale. Because if it's the rationale of normal, not normal, as the case was just mentioned by the mayor tonight, it actually just reinforces my underlying concern on this whole request, is we're sowing the seeds and creating a specter of doubt and mistrust in our administration, and related, I guess, would be that of fellow council members, including different chairs, members of the committee, that sort of thing. Because by virtue of this request, we've now created a no-win question. If we allow the information to flow, we've already heard from administration that says this is a body of work that is well housed in administration when it comes to the P-card requests, all that stuff. Information that was requested prior to the arrival of the city manager and the requester for that matter. I still would understand and need to understand, because as the mayor indicated, she would have some recommendations to bring this to council, from which I still would love to receive them as chair of audit for reflection that everyone could attend. I guess if in fact we believe, normal, not more normal, that there is a concern that maybe policy is not being followed, and by extension, even prior to the arrival of the city manager, we have policies that we have enacted by way of the audit committee, by way of P-card, and quite frankly, going down that path on the P-card discussion, that was a specific audit committee requests by our auditors, our accounting forensic auditors that actually looked at that issue and responded to it. So I am increasingly concerned of what the underlying motivation is for the information. Again, I have all sorts of time for any kind of constructive feedback in terms of what policy can be changed. I do think that based on the information and provided, which is very unorthodox to have it in open, despite the optics of the community that says, yes, we need to have all the information, I do get it. The fact of the matter is that I have some trust in the fact that the policy that was enacted is my level of trust. And quite frankly, my adage is trust but verify. So we have a third-party auditor that comes in. We've spoke to it annually, time and time again, that we've had awards bestowed upon us for our level of financial reporting. So I'm just trying to still understand the rationale. Is it there's some doubt in there that now needs to be reviewed, and I don't, for the life of me, I still don't understand when we're rooted in policy. Any type of information or expenditures would be rooted in policy. So if we don't, so it's either two things. We either don't believe in the policy or we don't believe that the policy was followed. And the latter is very concerning to me, and it's a bit of an accusation. Again, I just am concerned that the comments of normal, not normal, you'd indicated that you look at it from a budget request. Well, quite frankly, all those dollars that flow, the level of detail that flows actually builds into the budget in the totality of that budget for every department that's represented around the city and the horseshoe for this matter. So again, I am very much concerned of the motivation that is existing here. I think our administration is above reproach. I am actually very concerned of administration's confidence in the last little bit, and quite frankly, by extension of the citizenry that has now been sown seeds of thoughts of mistrust, red herrings and that sort of thing, when again, I can speak to the credibility of this organization. If there is policies that really need to be amended and looked at, I am absolutely all ears and have no problem as chair of audit when it comes to reviewing these such practices. But again, I'm not comfortable in terms of supporting this time. Thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, sorry, and thank you through the chair. In my day job, I work under and report to a board, and I have for over a decade. I submit our financials to a bookkeeper who sends the statements to our board treasurer, who then reports on them at our meetings. We have an annual budget and an annual audit, which is presented to the board and is submitted to the province as part of our obligations as a registered not-for-profit organization. I do know, though, that at any time I may be called upon by the board to explain expenses or any aspect of operations in greater detail than what appears on the balance sheet or profit and loss statement or transaction list. In addition to my day job, I have previously and continue to serve on a variety of working and governance boards that include the same process where I see it from the board perspective. I don't think it's unreasonable to have questions around details of budget or expenses. I do think the manner and timing in which those are approached matter. I feel that this request has caused reputational damage to our city, staff, and council. At this time, our staff are experiencing harassment from the community, and I feel that this has exacerbated it. I think that we're all aware that there are some gaps in our policies and procedures, and that due to short staffing for several years, we are now playing catch up in creating or amending policies. I think that if there's concerns around the lack of policy in regards to financial reporting or procedure, then a request to administration for development of said policy could be made in a more constructive manner. This request has put me in an extremely awkward position. I'm only speaking for myself here. If I decline to support this information request, the public perception is that I am supporting the concealment of information from the public. If I support this request, I am indicating a lack of trust in our administration. Neither of these things are true. I would like to suggest a couple of options. One is a briefing note as requested by Councillor Robbins, detailing how much time, staffing time and capacity would be required to answer some of these questions, which ones can be answered. Or, sure.
So we're going to call a recess here. There's a couple ladies here at security. If you would just remind them that they're not to be shaking their heads and making comments that are disrupting the flow of this meeting. The two ladies, or especially the lady in the red with her arms crossed, red hair with her arms crossed here. So we asked for some respect. You might not agree with the dialogue, but it's not your place to actually have people here disrespected who are trying to give their viewpoints. You've been very demonstrative in your approach, and I'd ask you to stop, and if you don't, I'm going to call for a recess and ask that you leave.
Councillor McGrogan, may I make a motion for a recess?
We'll take a 10-minute recess. We'll come back at 8:15. Okay, I'll just call the meeting back in session. I have to apologize to Councillor Van Dyke for interrupting you.
Thank you, through the chair. I was almost done. I had just wanted to say that perhaps Councillor Robbins' suggestion is the way forward, and if the concern is around insufficient policies within the organization, that we request administration to do a jurisdictional scan of comparable municipal policies around living expenses, severance, expense accounts, and staff turnover tracking, and bring it back to council for review. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Clark, go ahead.
Thank you. There are just a couple of things I would like to address that have been said. I vehemently object to the accusation by Councillor Dumanowski and others that this was done for any reason other than my role as a councillor. The suggestion that it was based on a political agenda or for personal gain is a very serious accusation, and I completely object to that. I am relatively concerned about the idea that I'm showing a mistrust of administration because I want this to come forward. I think that shows greater trust in administration than being so fearful that if this information became public, it would be undermining and embarrassing to executive. I've listed the policy reasons why I want this information, including potential policy changes. The implication that if our policies are being followed, then everything's fine. I think we should look at some of these items to determine whether our policies are fine, and that is 100% the jurisdiction of council. I am happy to hear about the cost, what this is going to cost. It's unfortunate that we haven't received that yet, but I'm happy to receive that information and make the decision on the information accordingly. But the confidentiality that has been talked about is not consistent with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Lots of public bodies actually proactively disclose the detailed expenses and salary of the employees of the public body, especially the executive. I wouldn't think that it would automatically be an embarrassing thing to do to disclose those items, but I am happy to have an estimate come forward about how much this is going to cost. I would like to have included in that the difference between having the multi-year information brought forward versus just the years of this council's term.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. I will just say that I'm just going to give my view. This, to me, I think back on whatever date it was that you put it forward as an information request, I actually leaned over to you and said, is this not really a notice of motion? Because you're asking for significant work. So I just want to say that I stand by that. I don't disagree with some of the things that you're asking for sure. But like I said, I think an hour ago, I think the conversation around this table is usually more valid than the thoughts of one. And we can usually come up with a better, end result when we collaborate on where we need to get to and why we're asking the information. So where you have a right as a citizen and as a councillor to get information, I have no issues with that. But there's no motion on the floor right now, so I don't know if there's any intention to put a notice of motion forward. But I guess if not, then I think this item is closed for discussion. We'll move on to the next item, which is new business. So I'm sorry. Sorry, Councillor Robbins, I missed you.
That's all right. Thank you, Councillor McGrogan. Through the chair, I do have several motions, and I'm going to give them individually. so that they could be debated individually. They're not lengthy, and I don't think they're very complicated, but I don't know if I can, I'll speak them carefully so that they can be put up, so everyone can know what I'm requesting. So and I'm hoping I'll get a seconder. I haven't spoken to anyone about any of these motions in the break or otherwise. So I'm just hopeful for that. So council directs administration to include other municipalities' practices regarding disclosure of severance agreements and expense claims in the environmental scan from Councillor McGrogan's previous motion. Does that make sense to you, City Manager, what I'm sort of going for there? That's my motion, first of 4.
I can second that.
Okay, have a seconder, any speakers? So all in favor with that motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
You're in a hurried and hot talk, aren't you? So I do want to speak to this because I do feel like I said before, part of Mayor Clark's document that you submitted to us, I think there's parts that we're all in favor of. We all want some clarity and transparency, and I think that I will continue to support that. And if you had come, and I just want to be very candid, if there was a motion to have complete transparency on all P cards going forward as an organization, I would have been all in. But when we are so pointed, I feel like it is absolutely accusatory. So it wasn't that I felt I was protecting administration from any sort of embarrassment, but to me, if we're going to be transparent, let's open it up and let's do all P cards, because I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with just picking and choosing certain ones. To me, the transparency is holistic, and it's throughout the entire organization. Just like the motion you're working on for Councillor McGrogan, there is a sunshine list that we're doing, and I think that I think there's validity in being honest with our public. We also have to hold our employees' information sacred and hold it to trust, and I think that's also, it's a balance, and we need to continue that balance. So that's all I wanted to say, Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. And for clarity, I never asked for a sunshine list. I asked for a compensation list that did not include names of employees, and in my mind, there's a big difference.
I apologize, Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you very much. You can tell I'm a little bit sensitive about that one. Thank you. So seeing no other speakers, we'll vote on that motion. So that's unanimous. Did you have another motion, Councillor Robbins?
Yes, I do, sorry. It's actually based on item number 3 of Mayor Clark's information request, so that council would direct that the city manager provided detailed accounting of all funds reallocated. And then for whoever is having to type this thing, there's a reference to section 20 of the administrative bylaw. So let me start that again. That city council direct that the city manager provide a detailed accounting of all funds reallocated in 2023 pursuant to section 20 of the administrative organization bylaw, just bylaw 4662, sorry, 4662. I think that covers the number 3 of Mayor Clark's information request.
Do I have a seconder? Go ahead. Seeing no seconder, I guess it's defeated.
Sorry, can I make a comment on that? I think my request includes or otherwise what the reallocations are.
I don't think it matters because we don't have a seconder, so I think it's.
But I would second it.
Oh, I see.
I will add the words or otherwise then. Oh, sorry, right after bylaw 4662, if you could put a comma or otherwise. Thank you very much.
I will second that.
Can I have some clarity on this motion, Councillor Robbins?
So we have a seconder on the floor, so now we can start discussion. City Manager, you had something to?
Yes, I did. Just for questions, what do you mean or otherwise? That's very broad. So I understand the motion. I understand the information you're looking for, but or otherwise, there's no parameters on that. It's just, or otherwise, there's a lot of funds spent in different, can you just kind of maybe tighten that up a bit? That would be helpful.
I can, I think, or I can at least tell you what I'm thinking in this, is that as you are our sole employee and we're doing the budget and you're going to provide us lots of information about the budget and what the needs are, it may be that you reallocated something that we haven't budgeted properly. And so that's what I'm really personally looking for, and I can only speak for myself, is understanding if the city manager, and the city manager often has to reallocate funds. This is not accusatory to me, but for me, it's to understand where you had to do that to make sure that the budget reflects that we wouldn't have to do that next year or the next 2-year cycle. I'm sure it's things you've already prepared for the budget. Does that help? Thank you.
Okay, with that clarity, Mayor Clark, are you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I say or otherwise, it is specifically that where funds were reallocated from the budget to somewhere else, and whether that's done under the AO bylaw or some other kind of authority, doesn't, I just want the money, clarity on what was reallocated.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. And my apologies, I have an enormous binder of annotated audit committee agenda, which I did not bring with me for this meeting. But is that not come forward in the audit and in the year-end financials? I believe I went through dozens of pages of that kind of information. Perhaps the chair of audit could speak to that. Thank you.
Yes, there is a detailed reference in terms of what allocation was made by the city manager. It's in the audit. I guess that goes back to my points of just making sure if there's some policy clarification we need to do versus the body of information that's requested. So, but yes, it's in there. Thanks.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, Chair McGrogan. I did have one question. City Manager, on this particular motion, Council directs that City Manager provide a detailed accounting of all funds related to 2023 pursuant to Section 20 of the AO bylaw. The AO bylaw, as I recall, the only change to us that we removed, you are our only employee, and council at one point had 2 other employees, and those 2 other employees were removed because we never had an AO bylaw that actually aligned them to us. So the entire time we had those 2 positions working for us, they didn't technically work for us. They shouldn't have worked for us. So council made a mistake in that bylaw, so you corrected that and moved it. Is that the bylaw changes we're talking about, the reallocation?
I believe so, but further to, sorry, through the chair, I believe so, but further to Councillor Van Dyke's and Councillor Hirsch's comments, all of this was laid out through administrative committee, through the audit committee. So this information, we can go redig it up, but it is readily available through the audit committee. But you are right, the only employee is the city manager position, and those other 2 positions I don't believe were correctly in the AO bylaw.
I will say that falls on council. So when we did this, and you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, because I was one of the biggest supporters of that addition, nothing to do with the people, it was about the positions. And we all kind of agreed that in a year it would make sure that, you know, there was service to the public. It wasn't about council. It always had to be taxpayer dollars that were first and foremost. And around the table, it wasn't unanimous. So And going through that process, we realized that council did not make the accurate AO bylaw changes, so we had two people reporting to mayor and council that were inaccurately doing so. So it's not just the city manager that makes mistakes on bylaws, it was us as well. So in all fairness, I just want to make sure, is that what we're talking about? I'm just going to right out ask. Andy?
City manager, go ahead.
Through the chair, internal discussions too, there is some real challenges with the AO bylaw itself. It's very prescriptive, and if you have the one employee who's in charge of operations, we've started a jurisdictional scan to look at the AO bylaw and what it means, and I've had discussions internally. There is some challenges because it goes deeper than just city manager, managing directors, and departments. I'm not saying we don't need to have an AO bylaw, but we need to have a serious review of our current one, because it, unfortunately, like some of our other bylaws and policies, are very much in need of updates.
Thank you, but sorry, I'm just going to get you to go right back to my question if you don't mind. I don't feel like I was answered, sorry.
Oh, no, I don't know the answer to that. I don't
So
want to.
did you make that change?
We did make the change on August 21st, I believe, but I'm going to look at City Solicitor Bullock to confirm that. We did change the bylaw, I believe, on August 21st. Is that correct? Or was that the procedural bylaw?
No, procedure bylaw was July. Oh,
Through the chair, the procedure bylaw was adopted by council on August 21st.
right.
There were some amendments also made to the AO bylaw that night, just in regards to the reorganization that occurred.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I have my facts aligned, because that seems to be the major change for the AO bylaw.
Thank you. It's coming back to me now through the chair. Also through the AO bylaw on August 21st and the procedural bylaw, we made the changes in the AO bylaw that reflected the changes in the reorg structure. Thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So my question, I guess, is if this information is contained in the 2023 audited financials that we received, do we still need to make this motion? Or vote on this motion, I guess, sorry.
Well, I would say that it's got a seconder, so we're going to have to vote on it. We still have a couple speakers. So sorry, am I missing something here? Okay, no, there's two more speakers. Councillor Robbins, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. I did go through the audit material on April 3rd, from the April 3rd meeting, so if it was contained in there, I did go through all the pages, once when it came out as a committee report and once when it was in our package, and so I didn't pick up on it if it's in there. If I could just be directed to where that information is, so we could leave the same direction. If the detailed accounting exists already, if you could just tell us where it is in that package, that would help me anyway, because I didn't pick up on that detail.
Mayor Clark.
Thank you. To Councillor Sharp's point, I don't think that was a mistake, but this is not referring to anything that's been changed in the AO bylaw. This is a section of the AO bylaw that has existed for some time. And there does appear to be, if this exact information is somewhere, I think then it's easy enough just to provide it.
Okay, and I guess I just have, that's the question I have is if this information is already available, do we need a motion on this? Do we have this information? Is it available to us? So it's in all of our, I guess maybe the questions even to the audit committee chair, is this information that we don't need a motion for that's already there? Okay, thank you. Mayor Clark, are you back up? No. Okay, thank you. So I don't see any other speakers. We have a seconder, I think. So let's vote on the motion. So it's defeated. Go ahead, Counselor Robbins, you have another one?
I do. Sorry, this will be, I was going to do 4, but 1 I want to think about it a little bit more and see if I can get a wording that will give a clear direction if it's agreed to by council. But I think this one we've already spoken about a little bit, that council directs that the city manager.
Counselor Robbins, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but apparently Counselor Hirsch's vote did not come through.
Oh, okay.
And I think we need it on record.
Yes, it was no, based on the fact that we could certainly get the information.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's all right, thank you. I'm sure Councillor Hirsch will just give me a page number and I'll be quite content to reread it. So the last motion I intend to make today is that council direct that the city manager's expenses and P-card P-card statements would be submitted quarterly to the audit committee. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Any speakers?
Mr. Chair, just, I'll call this a friendly amendment because audit meets 3 times a year. So can I ask for a try, whatever that vernacular would be, 3 times a year?
A triannual?
Sure.
Yes, I've been told there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, but I can amend
Correct.
my own motion if the seconder agrees.
Second.
So triangle, yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, I don't see any speakers, so we'll vote on the motion.
If I could, sorry, through the chair, late thought here. Just to add clarity on this, so I want to understand if this is going forward. I'm assuming this is going forward correctly, as of effective today going forward, or retroactive? There's no indication of that.
Can I just say, sorry, through the chair, I shouldn't just jump in. I'm sorry, we're losing our decorum or something. I think forward, and if the audit committee had concerns, I'm sure they would bring them back to council for further discussion. But I only see it prospectively, not retrospectively.
Thank you. Further to that, through the chair, is this in the closed portion of audit or the open? I'm assuming closed. Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
So, so I appreciate this. I again, with trying to do an air of observation in terms of everything, but I just can't help but think the body that signs off on the city manager's expenses, statements, et cetera, is already intact. So is it the intention for audit to, so I'm trying to find the rationale in terms of it coming to audit. So is it the idea that, just for information, is the idea that we would already in that activity of it being received for audit, is it just received for information, review, double checking the sign off? I'm honestly just trying to understand, because I think we've got, the checks and balances are in play here. I just would like to understand, again, a bit of the rationale. Again, not a problem in terms of the transparency piece. If we were always, staff were always fantastic. We literally get about 400 to 500 pages of data for audit. It's staggering the amount of information we get. And I'm just trying to be cognizant of the level of detail, again, that I feel like we're going a little over the top on this, and the fact that the sign off of that respective officer would be the duty of oversight, which has been enacted for a very long time. I'm just trying to understand the rationale, I'm sorry. And if it is just a matter of it being retained and indicated that it was received during the audit committee, then I guess that's fine too. But I do feel that it's going a little over the top, just my opinion.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. I just had a question for clarity. I was always under the impression city manager expenses were signed off by the mayor. Is that still accurate? Okay.
That is correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
However, I am limited in that I have to follow the policy. So regardless of whether I see something in there that I personally feel uncomfortable about, if it adheres with the policy, I can't simply not sign it.
Well, I would agree. We talk about policy all the time. In fact, I'm pretty sure I got told I couldn't do something out of policy earlier. So then my question is, isn't it smarter to try to change the policy to make sure that it aligns with what you're trying to achieve?
Absolutely, but I think that there is also value in seeing the P card statements that I've requested, because as I've outlined in
Yep.
my document, there are options, for example, to have the certain additional reporting and certain additional requirements, such as the most senior person at a function or something where expenses are going to be required, that the most senior person has to put those expenses on their expense report, rather than perhaps delegating that to a more junior employee, that then it wouldn't be accountable to council. And also, there was an additional thing about whether council should have to separately account for their expenses, rather than, for example, having the city manager or a member of executive put the expense on their expense sheet.
Sorry, may I through the chair? Just, Mayor Clark, if you wouldn't mind explaining that last bit. So are you concerned that, like, if I had an expense, I'm asking a member of administration to, is that the concern?
That could be one of the possible concerns,
Okay.
or, for example, if there was a meal shared by a member of council and a member of administration,
Okay,
that the counselor should pay for their meal.
I agreed, yeah, okay. Okay, I guess I don't see where anybody's done that, but if there's a concern, I would hope that we would have a conversation, but I guess here's my concern, is I don't have a concern because I do trust you to sign these off. Those were the responsibilities given to you, and I've never had a concern. You've never brought us a concern saying, council, in our closed meetings, I have a concern. So I'm concerned that we now are bringing it here. It just seems very pointed. I guess I'm not hearing that you want all of council to sign off on this. I don't think those duties need to come to any of us. Yeah, that's all I was. I just wanted to know what the concern was. But I would be more open to, if you had a concern, bringing a policy change forward, as you tell us.
Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. To me, the reason that it would go to audit committee is that there's questions about budget items that come out of that P card. It might be that we've given the city manager direction to work on some policy issue or whatever, and then it requires her to have expenses or to travel for that, and we wouldn't know. And we may need to change the budget to accommodate that in the future. So that's really what I'm looking for, is out of these expenses, does it come a need for budget change? And I feel like audit committee is the place that discusses those things probably the most closely and carefully. So what would you receive it for, to your question, is for information. But you may get that information and say, we need to do a budget amendment. And then that'll also filter through audit committee. So, or maybe through corporate services, depending on where it works out. So it's more as we give the city manager tasks and she diligently goes out and does them, if there's expenses associated with them, are we budgeting them correctly? That's, to me, what receiving it for information is for. And to be fair to Mayor Clark, she doesn't have her eye on all of that. She'll get the report and sign it, but how that fits into the bigger picture would be better known through audit committee. Not that I'm suggesting we should change the signing either. I'm not suggesting that. I think that there could be some more robust policy around all of this, and I'm certainly willing to discuss it. And I'm not going to make another another motion to do that today, because I really want to think about it and consider it and have city admin's input on that. But that was the reason, just for information, and also because I think the audit committee is best positioned to make suggestions to changes to the budget as these expenses may reveal to us.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, through the chair. In some past municipalities, one of the things, if I'm hearing some of the concerns, I don't have an issue with this, except for in that it will create more work for the audit committee. My thought is this is something that could be addressed through the annual 6-month check-in with the city manager, but there's also to the point of the question of how are people applying the policy? And I know in past municipalities, specifically the issue was gifting policy or that type of thing. So we did some internal training with the staff to make sure that everybody was applying. And in a complex organization such as this, we probably have departments that are using it differently, and we're trying to be consistent in how we apply the policy. So I think there's room for that, but it's also to find out how is everybody using their expensive, and then we would figure out, is there a flaw in the policy and how do we address it? But I also think it's a training piece of the policy that needs to be implemented.
Councilor Dubanowski.
Through the chair, notionally, I don't have a problem with this, but the more I reflect on it, to my earlier statement about the checks and balances, I feel they are in place. I do, when I read this, it's extremely targeted in nature, which suggests a couple things. One, we have, and I'm speaking for myself. The way I read it, it suggests either I have a need for elevated confidence in our employee, the city manager, by asking for this, or I trust the mechanisms, the checks and balances that are currently in place, including the mayor signing off, our audit committee, our auditors, either KPMG or MNP typically, who have been our auditors since I've been here. The statement around the need to see it so we can maneuver the budget, and I mean this respectfully, the city manager's expenses would certainly never come close to any budgeted line that we would put forward. Those kinds of expenses would be done through, tendering or other mechanisms. So I'm struggling to understand, outside a very targeted request here, what will be derived. And so for me, I'm either putting my confidence in this city manager and future city managers with the current checks and balances and mechanisms in place, or I'm not. And today I am. So I will not be supporting this.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Chair McGrogan. And through the chair, I do agree with Councillor Dumanowski. I struggle to support this. No offense to Councillor Robbins whatsoever. She and I agree to disagree lots of times. I do put trust into our city manager, and I always will. She and the managing directors do their work, hard work every day to do wonderful work for our community. And City Manager Mitchell has always been and always will be an upstanding manager, and I have trust in her and her crew. This to me is just a council getting into the weeds, and we already have things in place to make sure that we are above board, so I won't support this.
Mayor Clark.
Thank you. I very firmly believe that whether it's agreements or the expenses that I sign, those things should be reported to council. It puts me in an awkward position to know about all of these things and the rest of council doesn't. So I think, in terms of future practice or policy, that should just be a given, that when I receive an agreement or I receive an expense report that I need to sign off on, there should be some mechanism for that being all of those things being reported to council as a whole. Whether that's in our triannual reports or otherwise, I think that it's important for council to see those things, so it's not just me with my eyes on them. Additionally, and this kind of goes back to the other item we discussed about the reallocation. The only document that I've seen, and I could be wrong, is the reallocation of capital projects and major operating expenses, but that of course isn't the entire budget. So I think there is some things missing still, or potentially missing. So if that could be clarified at our next meeting as well. Thank you.
So I don't see any other speakers, and I'm just going to weigh in. I do see this as, again, sowing the seeds of doubt about whether our city manager is being above board, if she can, I guess, fool the deck by having a junior person pay for the meal. If we're starting to second guess those kind of things, I think we got deeper trouble, and I think this is a policy. I agree, Mayor Clark, that we need to be able to ferret stuff out that is untoward, but I haven't witnessed anything that is, and I have no reason to believe that it is. I just don't think we need to do it this way. I'd be happy with a policy change that if we went to our city manager and said we want certain things, like according to the 6-month review and the annual review, that we could get that information. I think the city manager does work that I guess we probably don't even understand as far as with community partners and what have you not. And I think we could second guess that all day long, and every council after us could. So with all respect, I know Councillor Robbins, you're just trying to find a middle ground that's reasonable, and I appreciate that. I just don't support this as the middle ground, so thank you. Two more now. We have Councillor Hirsch.
Sorry, I just, I actually appreciate the dialogue. It's kind of funny how we talk all things audit this evening when sometimes people think that that's the most boring subject in the whole world. But yet it just kind of really strikes a chord to how serious I certainly take the role, and certainly other committee members that sit on audit. And quite frankly, I want to reiterate, and the pride that administration, specifically everyone within the audit group, takes in the reporting, the information that's received. And I kid you not, I invite any councillors to, and quite frankly, you do get the information eventually through, as it flows through audit to council, so you know the body and the level of information that's there. So quite frankly, I will not be supporting this either, just for those reasons. Our Mayor Clark indicated about the sign-off. I'm very comfortable with the execution of that duty. I guess the argument could be if we take that, she'd indicated about sharing things that she signs. I mean, the amount of checks that get written on behalf of the city that the mayor would sign off on, I certainly did it when I was deputy mayor, is exorbitant as well. So I guess I just start wondering, when does it end in terms of the level of information that gets shared? So, with that, I won't support it. I did actually make a note, quite frankly, because we get through our services rendered by our audit group, and it's currently MNP. We do get the ability to ask them to do some special tasks. The last little bit was actually a review of our P-card procedures, so I'm very comfortable with that. But what I would actually look to doing, and maybe we can have that conversation with the committee, is sign off on senior employee expense control and do some spot checks in that regard. So in a situation where more than one employee attended a function and the expense was paid for by a senior, we would be able to do those, we could ask to do those spot checks. So that could certainly indicate the desire for us to make sure we follow policy. Thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I will support Councillor Robbins' motion, and I'll, just a couple of reasons why. I think it's important when you're developing policy and procedure that you separate the role from the person. So when you're determining policy, you're not necessarily casting doubt on a specific person. You're talking about the role in the organization and the checks and balances around that. And so I can understand where Mayor Clark is coming from, where if she's the only set of eyes on this, that maybe she wants another view in the future. And a couple of sayings that I think about a lot that I've heard from around this table and at other governance boards that I've served on is to keep your nose in but your fingers out, and trust but verify. And I think that this does all of those things. And again, I'm separating the role from the person. I don't think there's ever a problem with checks and balances. If you find a policy and procedure is not serving you, then you amend it. Thank you.
I see no one else on the speaker list, so we will vote. So that is defeated. Any other motions, Councilor Robbins? Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mayor Clark.
So no motion was made about a briefing note coming forward to council with costing. Is that happening automatically, or do we need a motion to do that? Because the premise of, sorry.
That's right. So Councillor Robbins had kind of indicated, why don't we get a briefing note on a synopsis of what this would cost us with all the man hours, et cetera. Does administration require a motion? Okay, so if you would make that, or anyone wants to make it.
So is my understanding correct that if that motion isn't passed, this written inquiry just is done?
So I think,
I'm
Well,
going
yes,
to
I
jump
think
in.
the
My
answer is
answer, my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, it's no different than when I did a written inquiry. If I didn't have the will of council, if I didn't have 5 votes, it did not move forward. Is that incorrect? Okay,
That
so-
would be a motion, a notice of motion.
Right, so, but if a written inquiry has an immense amount of work, it has to be a notice of motion, correct?
But none of us know whether it's an immense amount of work because we haven't been,
Other than they said so.
well, but they haven't looked, no one's looked into the cost yet.
Sorry, you're absolutely right. I think we're confusing two matters here. I'm listening to them say that your notice is an incredible amount of work, but if you want to do a written notice of motion to get in expenses, I think that you might get a seconder. Or not.
So do you mean how much it will cost? Well, I want the information. But if, through the chair, if that is what this council is requiring for me to get the information is an estimate of the costs, then I feel like that estimate should be automatically brought forward when I put my written inquiry forward. How much it will cost.
Councilor Robbins.
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair. I think that was the question that I had back in February, was when you sent the email requesting the information, was just curiosity about what it would cost, and that continues to be my sort of apprehension in addition to many other things. I said I wouldn't make another motion. I certainly could make one. I would like to know if all of that information were to be collected, how many man hours it would take, and what the cost would be, and what the budget amendment would be.
And I think we need to be clear now because it looks like we've negotiated pieces of your information request away or changed it. So I guess what we would need now is what information do you want a costing on? So if you could form a motion to that effect, I think that would be helpful.
I would like a costing. Again, I just want the information, but if this is the hurdle that I have to go through, I will do that. I direct, motion that council directs administration to prepare a costing of each of the items a costing of, or an accounting of estimated man-hours and budget for each of the items listed on Mayor Clark's February 20th written inquiry. Because at this point, I'm still not confident that the capital projects and MOE budget reallocation is a complete accounting of all of the reallocations. And I'm obviously looking for more than just going forward the city manager's expenses.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead, city manager.
Through the chair, did we vote on that first one? Or I just don't want, point of order, those two should be separate, in my opinion. They're two different motions. And I didn't want them getting confused as one big one, and I don't think we voted on the first one. Is that correct, Rondi? The first one's defeated. Okay, so just to make sure that that one's off on its own. Thank you.
If I may, Councilor McGrogan, can I please amend the motion to replace man with the word person?
I was going to call you on that.
I will second this motion.
Discussion. Can't imagine any more, and there isn't, so let's vote on it. So that's passed. Thank you. Just a reminder to the gallery, there's no clapping. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to new business now, and I think Councillor Hirsch, you might have a motion for us.
I do, Mr. Chair. Moving on to the item of the 800 block of 2nd Street Southeast. I move that council authorizes administration to enter a real estate purchase contract for a sale of the property described as the 800 block of 2nd Street Southeast with a certain party for a purchase price of $570,000 on terms and conditions satisfactory to the city solicitor and city manager, and if this transaction fails to close, to list the property on the open market at the identified fair market value.
I'll second that.
Okay, do we have any discussion, any questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll vote. So that's unanimous. We'll move on to, what am I missing? We'll move on to committee business. 12.1, 2024 Water Conservation Incentive Program. The sponsor is Development and Infrastructure, and it's recommended that council approve administration's amendment to the HatSmart program to incorporate water conservation efforts beginning in 2024 and a one-time funding of $150,000 to support water conservation initiatives to reduce community water use in 2024. Do we have a presenter? We do.
Hello.
Go
Good
ahead,
evening,
Mr.
Council,
Diggy.
senior leadership, and members of the public. I do have a brief presentation to walk you through that talks about the budget request and provides some highlights of the program if approved. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I think this is a good news story for the city of Medicine Hat. It's been a long time coming, and it ties in well with council's strategic priorities our environmental framework that was recently approved, as well as our water shortage management plan. So it is timely that this is coming forward to council at this time. This slide, I just want to highlight some of the issues we're trying to address with water usage within Medicine Hat. The chart on the left side indicates the majority of our customer classes. Residential, our Parks Irrigation Department, as well as our third-party irrigation, make up the majority of our water consumption during the months of May to October. Residential water consumption in Medicine Hat is 3 times higher during this time period as it is during the winter months. That causes significant stress on our city's infrastructure, as well as the time and effort to administer bills and work with customers. The chart on the right-hand side is an overlay of our water treatment volumes and our sewage treatment volumes. So the big gap in the white in the middle of the chart shows that that water that's being used isn't going into our sewage system, it's being used to irrigate lawns. At a very high level, our proposal is to create some incentives similar to the HatSmart program to provide incentives to residential customers to reduce water consumption. I've highlighted a few: xeriscape material, low water use appliances, a rain barrel program, smart irrigation control systems, as well as a community-wide event that we'll have. We have a municipal mingle coming up on May 15th. We'll have representatives there talking about water conservation and the importance it is to the community. So what we're looking for from council, this is a one-time funding request for 2024 to address the short-term concerns. So apply similar methodology to the HatSmart program. We have space on our city's website for the HatSmart program that can easily be adapted and administer this program. But going forward, as part of the 25-26 budget cycle, we'll be looking to request environmental conservation charge that will be applied to residential customers, similar methodology to natural gas and electricity, and those funds that would be collected would be directed towards water conservation efforts for residential customers. So next steps, obviously we've received support from our Development and Infrastructure Committee. We're looking for support from council tonight, and that support would include the approval of a budget amendment of $150,000 to fund the program. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Do we have a motion so we can start discussion?
I'll do that. I move that council approves administration's amendment of the HatSmart program to incorporate water conservation efforts beginning in 2024 and a one-time funding of $150,000 to support water conservation initiatives to reduce community water use in 2024.
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Dickey? Any, looks like Councillor Sharps, you're up.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for your presentation. I'm very interested in these programmings and what the city's doing, as we can just see that we're going into a drought, and obviously it's not new, so it's good to see that the city's getting involved. One of the things, and I'm sure you know, but as a consumer, I'm running around this weekend trying to find a rain barrel because I don't want to use the city. You know, I don't want to be one of those people looking for a city one because we're leaving that for the citizens, right? Couldn't find one to save our lives. So even though it's not an incentive, I've got to ask, is there something the city can do in its use of just the ability to help consumers get access? I mean, I think the city's a big spender. I don't think you should spend your money, but maybe it would help facilitate everyday users like me getting them if the city could look at doing something like that, because it's impossible to get right now, unless you are buying a lot at a time.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Sharps, I appreciate that concern. I haven't shopped for a rain barrel recently, but appreciate that concern, and that is definitely one of the incentives. Obviously, if we can capture the rainwater and use it at different times, that certainly helps lower the water bill for consumers. So we'll take that advice and we'll look internally. I know a few departments have purchased rain barrels. It is not our job to administer purchasing and reselling rain barrels or providing them, but we will be having some form of giveaway at the municipal mingle. Right. So if you want to tell your friends, we do have a few rain barrels to give away. So
I just thought, you know, if we could use the purchasing influence of the city to try to get them, it'd be great, because they sure can't get them anywhere. Amazon sold out. You can't get anywhere in town. You can't get one. So as we're telling people to conserve, it'd be great if we could show them where to get it or give them some options, because otherwise it becomes very hard to do exactly what we're asking them to do. So as far as the xeriscaping, what kind of things are is the intention to do?
Through the chair to Councillor Sharps, more information will be available on our website once approved tonight. If it's approved, the Hadsmar website will be up to date with information specific to the program and the eligible products and types of work that will be.
Okay, and they'll be able to apply tomorrow?
Yep. And the plan is to retroactively approve purchases that occurred in 2024, so back to January. So if something was purchased earlier this year that is in line with the eligibility criteria, we would support that.
And if it's incredibly successful, you will come back to council and tell us it's incredibly successful?
That would be my hope.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. I just wanted to say thank you for this initiative. I'm very excited about it. I think there's a lot of synergies here in our strategic plan, so I appreciate that we're seeing things moving, which is great. And I must say the charts that you've given with that water compared to waste is quite alarming. It's quite alarming. So I think anyone who looks at that would say there's need for this program. So I hope it will be full and you'll come back and say we need more money because people want to conserve and we want to help them do it. So thanks for bringing this forward. I fully support it.
Thank you.
Mayor Clark.
Thank you through the chair. There, on that one slide where you listed the types of products and services products that would be eligible, I'm just wondering, because it seems like the irrigation or watering, based on the graph and what you mentioned, was kind of the key issue, and I don't really know how far $150,000 goes these days when, people are applying for to landscape their yard or whatever. I'm just wondering why the washer was included as opposed to just kind of trying to focus on that one spike, the reason for that spike.
Great question, and through the chair to Mayor Clark. We did a scan of what other municipalities provide as well, and we're not unique in this space. Other municipalities also provide something similar to this. We provide an incentive through the current HATSMART program for washers and dryers just because they do high efficiency, use less electricity, less natural gas, whatever the case may be, whatever type it provides. Our main focus and the details of the funding envelope will be on the website tomorrow as far as how much the incentive is. The intent is not to pay for all of the work. The intention is to nudge the customer or consumer that is considering, I want to change my grass lawn into xeriscaped or a flower bed or whatever the case may be, to give that incentive. And so it'll be 50% up to a maximum of, and those details will be on the website tomorrow. We just wanted to provide that information. But yeah, our main focus is definitely on exterior watering, and that's the peak or the hump. That's what we're trying to shave, is reduce that water consumption.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Thank you, through the chair. Manager Dickey, thank you for coming. You're going to get a lot of accolades for this one. You're smiling there, and you should be. I mean, this is a good news item. It's a nice item to end on tonight, quite frankly. Again, as has been indicated, these are easy to support. These items, HATSMART has been around a long time. We were leaders in that many terms ago, and it wasn't council supported it, but it was management who brought that forward, and you continue to evolve and make it more relevant, and the public, the buy-in has been tremendous over the years. So accolades to the public for buying in, but you beat me to it. The incentive is not to pay for, it's to nudge, and really pay homage really to somebody who's doing it of their own accord. But I do like the fact, because there are a lot of people like myself who like our green grass, and I will never change my opinion on that. However, I might consider xeriscaping part of my yard, or I might look to do low-flow toilets or do something else. So you're giving something for everyone, and I appreciate that. But in the end, overall, water conservation is important, and certainly with the the conversation happening, not just here, but provincially and elsewhere. This is appropriately timed, so kudos to you, and I'm assuming you're going to be out of your 150,000 very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch?
Well, I'm in full support of this, and I am going to climb a little bit on the soapbox and indicate, I just recall vividly now a conversation I had with then Premier Stelmach, and that's how far I'm going back, where he was actually in town to discuss the royalties restructuring for the oil and gas, if you guys all remember that. So we ended up having quite a discussion because they said, well, congratulations, kind of like herding cats, because we want to have oil and gas, do well. Lo and behold, all of a sudden here we are. But we wanted a strong oil and gas division, but we wanted a royalty structure that made sense for the residents and the citizens of Alberta. And he goes, actually, Darren, this isn't even the toughest item I ever had to deal with. It's going to be water. And that was how many years ago? And so there was a foresight a long time ago to start discussions, and I'm actually quite pleased. Unfortunately, it takes the concern of a drought to get us to a call of action. That's unfortunate, but here we are. And I have to tell you, in my day job, dealing with ag producers, just to see the devastation and the tears and the conversations when you talk about people that have cattle and crops that were failing. And to witness second and third generation families that are on the brink of actually just giving up, and to see what that effects are to them. And for me as a banker to have the most difficult conversations in the world in terms of, okay, now how are we gonna manage through this? And to have the fear of people worried that I'm gonna come in and really, at the end of the day, work with clients. That's my overall intention. So that aside, I guess I'm gonna stand on my soapbox now and just do a plea to the citizens of Medicine Hat, just to look to curtail their watering habits this year. I would even propose, and I think it was actually circulated, even if you looked at clearing up or curtailing 10% of your traditional habits and look for other alternatives, it would actually make a huge difference. So that's my plea on behalf of our ag people outside the city of Medicine Hat and inside, quite frankly. I would think that would be very gratifying to know that we've got their back. So thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you, through the chair. I already made many comments about this in our committee meeting, but I just wanted to say thank you to your team. This is something that people have been asking for since the beginning of our term, and I know that if all of council supports this, there's going to be a lot of happy residents of Medicine Hat tomorrow being able to access this program. And just to echo Councillor Hirsch, we want to encourage people to conserve water in this drought. We live in the driest part of the province, Palliser Triangle, semi-arid desert, and even if we weren't in a drought, it would be smart to conserve water. So thank you, and I look forward to this program.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I just want to say that I bristle at mid-year budget amendments, as we've talked about, but there's some valid ones, and this is a darn good one, and it's a reason why I think we do have the ability to amend budgets in mid-year. So this is a great timing. I know a lot of folks in the Hat think that the city isn't doing much about drought. I know the opposite to be true. There's a lot of hard work being done to look at our water situation and try and fix it, and this is just one step in that direction, and I just want to thank you and your team for really good work, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, and I can't take all the credit. It was definitely a team behind me. Jamie Garland, who's here, Environmental Utilities, as well as Adria Coombs in the environmental group. So it's not me, I'm the spokesperson. I got the short straw. So, but yeah, definitely it's something that was top of mind and has been top of mind for a while, and we're very happy to bring this forward at this time.
Thank you. Seeing no speakers, we can vote on the motion. Should be tight. That's unanimous. So we're going to move to 13, which is notice of motions. Any notice of motions for the floor? So number 14 is council member reports. Do we have any council member reports? Okay, so we'll go to, I'd like to have someone make a motion to go back into close to finish our discussion.
I'll make that motion, Andy.
I'll second.
And we'll vote. I think we don't. Do we need to vote? And that's unanimous. Just want to thank the gallery for eventual adherence. I want to thank the security guards who've tried really hard to keep things in order tonight. Very much appreciated, so thank you for your work tonight. And with that, we'll adjourn.
Councillor McGrogan, can we?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Are we going to take a recess for, because I know that there are press upstairs.
I guess it's the, do you want to take a 10-minute recess? Anybody? Do we need a vote on it? How do we do it? Okay, we'll do a 5-minute recess to let, so let's say we come back at 9:30 and this meeting is adjourned.